Hello everyone, welcome to today's class on anatomy and physiology of the cardiac system. This topic helps us understand how the heart functions to maintain blood circulation and how various drugs can influence cardiac activity. Let's begin our section. The first slide is regarding introduction. The cardiac system, also known as the circulatory system, consists of the heart and a vast network of blood vessels. Its main role is to transport blood throughout the body, carrying oxygen and nutrition to tissues and removing carbon dioxide and waste product. This process ensures that all organs function efficiently and the body remains in balance. Now let's move on to the next slide to understand where the heart is located and how large it is. Location and size of the heart. The heart is a hollow, cone-shaped muscular organ located in the thoracic cavity between the lungs within a space called mediastinum. It is slightly tilted towards the left side and lies behind the sternum. The heart rests on the diaphragm and weighs about 250 to 350 grams, approximately the size of the closed fist. This protected position allows it to efficiently pump blood through the lungs and the rest of the body. Let's continue to the next slide to discuss the chamber of the heart. The human heart has four chambers, two atria on the top and two ventricles below. The right atrium receives deoxygenated blood from the body through the superior and inferior vena cava and passes it to the right ventricle. The right ventricle then pumps this blood to the lungs through the pulmonary artery for oxygenation. The left atrium receives oxygenated blood from the lungs through the pulmonary vein and transfer it to the left ventricle. Finally, the left ventricle pumps oxygen-rich blood to all parts of the body through the aorta. The muscular wall called the septum separates the right and left side of the heart. Now let's move on to the next slide to understand the valve of the heart. The heart has four valves that maintain one-way blood flow. The tricuspid valve is located between the right atrium and the right ventricle. The pulmonary valve is found between the right ventricle and pulmonary artery. The mitral or bicuspid valve lies between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The aortic valve is located between the left atrium and aorta. These valves open and close according to pressure changes, preventing any backflow of the blood. Let's move on to learn about the layer of the heart valves. The heart valve consists of three layers: the epicardium, myocardium, and endocardium. The epicardium is the outer protective layer. The myocardium is the thick muscular middle layer responsible for contraction and pumping action. The endocardium is the smooth inner lining that prevents friction and protect the walls and chambers. Together, these layers ensure that the heart functions efficiently and safely. Now let's go to the next slide and discuss the blood supply to the heart. The heart has its own blood supply provided by the coronary circulation. The right and left coronary artery, which branches from the base of the aorta, supply oxygen-rich blood to the heart muscle. The right coronary supplies the right atrium and ventricle, while the left coronary artery divides in the circumstance and the left anterior descending branches to supply the left side of the heart. Deoxygenated blood from the heart muscle drain into coronary sinus, which opens into right atrium. Let's now proceed to the conduction system of the heart. The heart conduction system controls the heartbeat through electrical impulse. It includes the synovial artery or SA node, known as the natural pacemaker, located in the right atrium. It generates electrical impulse that cause the atria to contract. These impulses then reach the atrioventricular node or AV node, which delay the signal slightly to allow the ventricles to fill. From there, the signal travels to the bundle of His, right and left bundle branches, and finally to the Purkinje fibers, leading to ventricular contraction. Now let's move on to the next slide to understand the cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle refers to one complete heartbeat, including both contraction and relaxation phase. It consists of atrial systole, ventricular systole, and diastole. During atrial systole, the atria contract and push blood into ventricle. In ventricular systole, the ventricle contract and push blood to the lungs and body. Finally, during diastole, both atria and ventricle relax, allowing blood to fill again. Let's move on to the phases of cardiac system. The cardiac cycle includes five main phases. First, atrial systole, which means atria get contract. Second, isovolumetric contraction, which means ventricle contract but walls remains closed. Third, ventricle ejection, which means blood is pushed into arteries. Fourth, isovolumetric relaxation, which means ventricle relax but walls are still closed. Finally, passive filling, which means blood flow from atria into ventricle naturally. Let's move on to the next slide to understand the heart sound. Heart sound are produced by the closing of valve during the cardiac cycle. There are two main sounds, lap and dub. The first sound, lap or S1, is caused by closure of atrioventricular valves, and the second sound, dub or S2, occurs when the semilunar valves, the aortic and pulmonary valves, get closed. Now let's proceed to the next slide, the blood vessels of circulatory system. The circulatory system includes three main type of blood vessels: artery, veins, and capillaries. Arteries carries oxygenated blood away from the heart. Veins bring deoxygenated blood back to the heart, and a capillary connect the two, allowing exchange of gas and nutrients. This network ensures efficient transport of material through the body. Now let's move on to the next slide to understand circulatory pathway. Pulmonary and systematic circulation. The heart supports two main types of circulation. Pulmonary circulation carries deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle to the lungs for oxygenation and then return it to the left atrium. Systemic circulation carries oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the entire body and bring deoxygenated blood back to the right atrium. Let's move on to the next slide to discuss the cardiac output. Cardiac output is the amount of blood pumped by each ventricle per minute. It is calculated as stroke volume multiplied by heart rate. This value reflects how efficiently the heart is functioning. Now let's go on to the next slide, factors affecting heart rate. Heart rate is influenced by several factors. It increases the exercise, stress, fever, anxiety, and sympathetic nervous system stimulation. It decreases with rest, parasympathetic stimulation, and in trained athletes. Hormone like adrenaline and the thyroid hormone also affect heart rate. Let's move on to the next slide, the nerve supply of the heart. The heart is controlled by autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nerve increase heart rate and contractility, while the parasympathetic nerve, mainly through the vagus nerve, slow down the heart rate. Now let's proceed to the next slide, the physiological property of cardiac muscle. The cardiac muscle shows four major physiological properties. First, atomicity, it can contract without nerve stimulation. The second is rhythmicity, it contract in a regular pattern. Third is contractility, it can contract forcefully. And fourth is conductivity, it can transmit electrical impulse quickly. These properties allow the heart to beat continuously and efficiently. Now let's move on to the next slide, that is blood pressure. The blood pressure is the force exerted by blood on the wall of artery. It measured as systolic pressure over diastolic pressure. The normal range is 120 bar 80 millimeter of mercury. Blood pressure depends on cardiac output, blood volume, and resistance of blood vessels. Let's now proceed to the next slide, the function of cardiac system. The main function of cardiac system include transport of oxygen and nutrients, removal of carbon dioxide and waste, maintenance of blood pressure, and regulation of blood temperature. It also plays a major role in hormonal transport and immune defense. This system works continuously to sustain life and homeostasis. Let's move on to the final slide, that is conclusion. To conclude, the cardiac system is the vital transport system of the body. The heart acts as a pump, maintaining continuous circulation through the lungs and body. Understanding its anatomy and physiology help us various cardiovascular diseases and their pharmacological management. Thank you for listening.